Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Another entry here based on your suggestions, another good suggestion here. I picked this one because those of you that have fears of giant insects, well, imagine something like this, like a centipede, but many times larger. So those of you especially that have a fear of, let's say, those ugly looking things, those centipedes, I myself, I don't know, there's this strong aversion to them. Just seeing all those tiny little arms, the cold feel associated with the body, it just creates that disturbing feeling that when you have something like that nearby you. So imagine being in the sea and then seeing something like this, and then it happens to be something that's 60 feet long, and all of a sudden you're dealing with a whole other world of terror. And I'm talking about the cryptid that's known as the conrit, which you'll see a picture of here. Basically, what it is it's a giant centipede, but it lives in the sea. And so it's sometimes known as the Great Sea Centipede. And the most interesting thing about it is, unlike its cousin on land that uses all those ugly little legs to move around, instead switch it with fins, and you have the thing here, the conrit that lives in the sea. So very same concept, very same body. Nothing really changed as far as its length, as far as its width. The only big difference is, instead of those tiny little legs that the centipedes use to move around, instead it utilizes fins. And it makes perfect sense. There would be most likely something like this living in the sea right now, because anything and everything involving mammals or any other type of fish or sea life currently in the oceans, obviously they have fins. So something like this that has a long angular body that moves in like a sea serpent type manner, like let's say your average snake, the way it moves its body, and it essentially moves in the sea. Imagine similar thing like this and covered with many fins, and you have an almost perfect specimen to travel these oceans. Now, the interesting thing also is that there have been several reported claims, very credible claims, of visible eyewitnesses, and I'll describe those here in a minute. But yeah, this is the cryptid that's going to be described here in the video, the conrit. A great sea centipede is also its name, and is found specifically in southeast Vietnam, towards the seas located there. So this is the history of it. You have to go back to about the 1800s, the early 1800s or so, and you'll start getting into the first encounters with the conrit. Much of this history actually comes from a gentleman by the name of Dr. A. Krempf. He was the director of Oceanographic and Fisheries Service of Indochina, and he basically took it upon himself to do a lot of research into, I guess, a lot of the sea life, whatever the fishes and anything else that was there in Indochina. And coming across his research, he dedicated some of it to this. In fact, this is what he did. He interviewed a lot of eyewitnesses who reportedly have seen not just a conrit in the sea, but also saw the bodies of a conrit sometimes on land, because apparently these conrits, whenever they die, or whenever they, I guess, do something that allows them either to go on land and not escape, or in some cases, as we've seen with certain whales, where they purposely go on land and beach themselves. Well, this some witnesses have seen this with the conrit. For example, here's what happened. You have to go to 1833, and it was purportedly the first time someone saw a beached conrit. It was found by a guy named Trine von Kahn, again back in 1833, and he was the one that told this Dr. Krempf, that he found this creature, and when it was measured, it was about 60 feet long and then about 3 feet wide. So imagine seeing that monstrosity there on land. You see something like this, again, a giant centipede, your average one that people sometimes have in their homes or in their apartments, but multiply that exponentially, and you see this on land, and that's what this guy saw. But this conrit was beached, so I don't know if he saw it and it was still alive, or maybe he saw it and it was already in its death throes or probably even dead, but that's what he reported to the doctor, and then that's where the doctor got a lot of his descriptions from. There was also another reported incident, this time having to do with an actual ship and a whole crew on the ship witnessing this great sea centipede. The ship was called the HMS Narcissus, and I believe this is the picture of it here. And the whole crew was traveling near an area of Cape Falcon, Algeria. And then all of a sudden there was like great excitement because some of the sailors told everyone to, look across the sea, look right on the side, and that's where they saw this thing. Now, the previous one, the one that was the beached one, was 60 feet long. These sailors, the ones on the HMS Narcissus, their estimate was that this thing was actually 135 feet long, more than double in length than what the beached one was. And if it was truly 135 feet in length, then it would actually be the longest creature pretty much ever. I don't think there's anything else that has been reported, at least on an eyewitness level, that's longer than that. Anything right now that's the longest creature on Earth that's been reported as visible by eyewitnesses remains the blue whale. So anything as far as this being 135 feet in length easily surpasses that altogether. They stated that this creature, when it swam by the HMS Narcissus, they were able to see that it possessed what they called an immense number of fins. Again, replace all the little legs that the centipedes would have with fins, and that's what they saw. And they said that it allowed it to propel itself very easily through the water with enough speed actually to keep up with the HMS Narcissus. I'm not sure how fast those kind of ships go altogether. Somebody might have to help me on that. But imagine however many knots it's going through in the sea. Well, this thing, whatever it was, this conrib, was easily able to keep up with it. So much so that it did this for actually 30 minutes. So they were able to clearly see it right next to the ship for a good half hour. No interruptions. They just saw it right then and there, and so they were able to get a good detail of it. And then finally it just sank below the surface, and then that was it. They never saw it again. Cut to a little later, 1883. And then there in Vietnam, there were several Vietnamese men that also came across a beached conrib. This time it was a body of it, but it was found decapitated. It was actually dead, of course, and the way it was found, there was no head. But they could see that sure enough, it had the same segmented joints that some of the other encounters, the ones that people have had with the conribs, saw as well. The interesting thing about this is that because of the decapitated and the dead status of this carcass, they were actually able to touch it, I guess play around with it, just basically handle it, as opposed to some of the other encounters. And the way it was described was the men that came across this body and I guess either hit the body or hit it with something else, it actually created a metal-like sound. The way they described it was as if you were to take a sheet metal and slap something against it. It would create that metallic sound, that metallic reverberation that you would associate with that. So whatever this body is made of, the conrib, it seems to have the same characteristics of something involving metal or maybe something metallic altogether, but that's basically what its shell is consisting of. This could have been the actual evidence to show 100% proof that the conrib is real. I mean, imagine if this was actually kept and it could be studied even to this day. You put something like that in that yellow liquid that preserves anything involving carcasses. I think it's called formaldehyde, and when you do that, it can stay there for ages. So imagine the discovery of a lifetime, something like this that could be even to this day photographed and viewed. Unfortunately, that did not happen because another interesting thing that these Vietnamese men noticed was this carcass of this conrib. It was horrible. It was pungent. It was so bad that they could not keep it there. Apparently, the foul smell that the carcass had was so terrible that just by sheer force, they had to actually take it back into the sea in order to ensure that that smell no longer permeated within that area. So such a great tragedy. Again, imagine something like this, probably the greatest discovery within the entire lifetime of finding animals in the sea, and yet it could not be held on because unfortunately the smell of it was so bad, so putrid, so rotten that that was it. They had to put it back into the sea in order to ensure that it did not stay within the area. Who knows? Maybe it was making people so sick, just the sheer smell of it. I mean, sometimes you hear about people that come across, like policemen, they come across areas where they've had carcasses. The smell is so bad that people immediately start puking. Imagine something like that to this effect with these carcasses. Now, as far as what the actual conrid is, fascinating thing about it is it it may not actually be in a sense a cryptid, and what I mean is this: it may just actually be like a real life animal, with so much of the sea undiscovered, especially let's say the largest portions of the sea at the bottom that remain practically untouched to this day. I mean, they are places there that have never seen any human interaction for millions of years, beyond anything involving human civilization. So anything as far as these things, wherever they are, and there's a phenomenon that the more you get to the bottom of the sea, the larger things become. I think it's called gigantism. Then when you run into that, then you could have a whole civilization of these conrits basically living untouched, unharmed, unviewed there at the bottom of the sea. It's just that every now and then one of them will surface up into, I guess, our realm, and then that's when people come across it altogether. So that's why I say it may not actually even be a cryptid, where it's like a one of a kind, out of this world, original, almost fantasy-like creature. Instead, it could be something that evolution and science naturally made to live in the sea. Again, you have something like this that is so perfect to do so. It just happens to be at the bottom of the sea, in the areas that man would never ever go to. So it's just through the occasional sheer luck where one of these conrits just happens to come up, and then in some cases the carcasses are there, that's where we encounter it. I believe that that's the great opinion too, from the others that were stating that it's just a natural animal. It just happens to be living in an area where we as humans just don't come across it too often. Some others have explained that maybe, just maybe, the conret could be a long lost, like some kind of giant crustacean of some sort, or it could indeed be some kind of giant sea serpent, like a giant sea creature, like a mythological creature, the kind of stuff that you would hear and see drawings of in the tales from the 1500s and 1600s, always coming across sailors. But again, I'm not putting too much credence into that. Instead, I really do think that this conrit is maybe just a real life animal. It's just the very rare nature of its location that makes the huge difference. But yeah, that is this particular video, the conrit. If anyone has any more encounters, unfortunately, it seems like with the tales happening in the mid earlys and then the late 1800s, that's about it. There hasn't been any other experiences since then. So if anyone has anything else that they would like to report, anything else that people have found, please share the comments below, so that way everyone else can see it. It'll be fascinating to hear if anything has been done or experienced within the 1900s, maybe even into the 2000s, especially those of you that are again in the Vietnamese area, because this seems to be the grounds where this thing, whatever this great sea centipede is, where that's where it's located. So, all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.